So my story for the Gulf War starts off in Germany. At the time, I was a 20-year-old reserve soldier working for AFES, and I was in one of the first reserve units that were activated for 7th ARCOM as a reserve unit. Well, when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, it was kind of originally just kind of a blip on the radar, because no one knew where it was going to go to, where it was going to end up at. As the months progressed, we started seeing the possibility for units to be activated, and they started looking at divisions coming out of Europe, and the people in my reserve unit, the 244 Support Center, we were at the RTOC for 7th Corps, and we were thinking along the lines, wow, for the U.S. to pull a whole corps out of Europe, that's kind of not going to happen. Well, I remember the day I was sitting there in the living room, and Colin Powell was sitting there, and he says, we're going to pull a corps out of Europe. Well, out of the 2 corps in Europe, 7th Corps was due to deactivate, so we knew that we were in line to be activated to go to the Middle East. Backing up that we were just a newly formed reserve unit, we had no equipment. All we had were desks. So as soon as we started, I guess, seeing the way the wind was blowing, the people in my unit, which was an eclectic mixture to begin with, started pulling all their resources together to try to outfit our unit. So we spent about 2 months scouring across Western Germany at the time, laterally transferring equipment so that we would be ready to be deployed. Being a TOC, we were extremely brass heavy. We had 4 lieutenant colonels in our outfit and 1 full bird, and I could say that out of the 50 some odd people originally in the unit, I would say there was about 12 NCOs, enlisted men. We landed, we went to a tent city, and we stayed there for a week, and the next thing you know is we were on a 24-hour convoy out to the middle of the desert. It was a different time. I don't think the younger generations could understand it, because we had no communication. The mail service was sporadic at best, and it was almost like the Army was feeling its way out as we went. But it wasn't a problem, because we knew that we'd overcome it. When we got out to the desert, we rolled in, and it was just this very large berm that was empty. They pulled in with buses. We got off with our backpacks, and they were like, make a home. Being since this was all kind of spur of the moment to begin with, it felt like our sea bags, our Connex, was somewhere still sitting in Germany, and we didn't receive all that equipment for probably about a month after we'd gotten there. At that point in time, we were already well into the air war, about to begin the ground session. So we showed up at the berm. We put up GP mediums. The weather was horrific. It was winter. It rained. It was cold. The facilities for us were, we had no hot water. We ate MREs for about a month, and the water that we did have, we used to hand wash clothes. Being a very top-heavy unit, our shifts, our guard shifts even included, we had 1 lieutenant colonel that did guard duty with us. That's how short-handed we were. And I'm going to back that up with that we were an eclectic unit to begin with. Like I said earlier, we were just a mix of reserve soldiers. People that had ETS'd in Germany, people who had spouses that were dependents, civil service. It was really an odd mix of people, and that's why when we got out there, it was a team effort. Our colonel said anybody from a major on down had to pull guard duty, and the reason being is, we had a limited amount of enlisted people, and we had 12-hour shifts plus details and guard duty. So for a good month and a half, we were running off maybe 4 hours of sleep. As the days progressed, we started getting into a routine. Being the RTOC for 7th Corps, we kind of had to feel our way into that role, because we really hadn't established ourselves due to the unit itself just being brought into being in September. So we were learning personalities, we were learning roles, and we were learning what was expected of us at a core level, because our briefings were to the deputy. And let me tell you that the deputy was not always pleased with the way we briefed. So we had a learning curve there. So between the details, the guard duties, the four-seaters that had the panoramic view, the no showers, the constant guard duty, you might not appreciate it then, but you certainly appreciate it now for what it gives you. So as the days progressed, we went into our mission. Being at the Corps level, we were very fortunate because we saw multiple. We saw the movements that were occurring. We were at a level where we knew when the jump-off dates were for either the air war or the ground war. We saw the results of the diplomatic back and forth, because we would have a tea time of when everything would jump off, and yet we would see that get delayed because at that point in time, someone was trying to negotiate something else to make sure that this didn't happen. So we were there at a level where we saw those results that were occurring from the political side. Even though we were aware of that, as a whole, you were still isolated from what was occurring in the outside world, because you struggled to get any news. The big deal for us was when we could get BBC on the radio. That was our lifeline. When AFN came up, AFN would run maybe 4 songs the whole hour. The rest of it, they just pummel you with information. At that time, no one had any idea what to expect and what the result would be. Given a couple of days, they started seeing what the rhythm was going to be for the air war. We got back into routine, and we just stood by and we waited for anything to come across the line. We were very fortunate that we only had one scud probably get within like 15 miles of where we were at, and that was the second place that we had went to. But you don't know. It's the unknown that drives the adrenaline. People. It doesn't necessarily take a traumatic event to live on the edge, because you drive yourself to that point because you're unsure of what the future would bring. And speculation doesn't help you out. So as the air war progressed, we got into a groove. We ended up jumping towards the tail end of the air war engagement, so they packed us up. We packed everything up and we jumped, and it was a very good jump for us, because we moved from out in the middle of nowhere where we had no facilities to where at least we were inside a fenced-in perimeter that the Saudi government had bunkers in. Even though we weren't allowed in those bunkers, at least they were there. And I say not allowed because it was under a contract with, I think, a U.S. contractor had built that facility, and all the bunkers were locked. It was next to an airfield, and Hoffman al-Batin was where it was at. That location was nice because we finally had rubber mats in our tents. We had a little bit of hot water. We still had the panoramic view with the bathrooms, and those people that were over there understand it. Nothing like standing in the bathroom and saying hi to your friends as they walk by. But it was a better facility, and it was a more secure facility. When the ground war started, 7th Corps, through this whole time as a 7th Corps TOC, we were always keeping track of all the assets within there. We were giving intel briefs to the deputy. We were tracking all the rear echelon units that were out there, and the thing about it, during this point in time, this was before mass use of electronics. We did this all by hand. We had huge maps. We would draw all the units in, and every day we would go through these units and check where they were at to make sure they were where they were supposed to be. It wasn't a bad job because we periodically got to jump on a helicopter, just fly around the rear and check units. But it brings to light how massive and how quick all of this occurred, because you could see where there were places where units were not aware of what was going on, and that you were like the first communication they had, and luckily more often than not they were where they were supposed to be. So that was a good point. When the ground war started, they were going to do a jump talk that was going to follow behind the first elements. And we were very excited about that because we were like, let's roll. Well, history tells us now that the front elements, they were moving pretty dang quick. I mean, they didn't slow down. So our talk could not keep up with the first elements across the berm. So on the radios, we sat there and we would listen to all the engagements that would come in, anybody that was making any contact, and how fast they were going. It was a very unique place to be, to hear all this coming back. One night, I was sitting there, and granted, you got to realize that all this was occurring over a very limited amount of time. That a colonel rolled in. He said, I need a vehicle. And we're like, why? And he's like, well, I just rolled through a whole bunch of barbed wire. I got to catch up with my troops. You know, that's just how fast it was. Find him something, he's out the door. The other issue that they were, not necessarily that was an issue, but some of the other opportunities that occurred was that, the news covered the amount of EPWs, or enemies prisoners of war, that were just showing up randomly. So we started receiving notification or feedback from the local, they were not MASH units, but the hospitals, that units didn't know what to do with EPWs. Before they could go to the camp, they had to be processed anyway, so they were just dropping them off at hospitals. So myself and a couple of MPs, we decided that we'd volunteer to just go pick EPWs up. So for a couple of days, all we'd do is, whenever we got notified, a hospital would call in, we'd just say, we'll be there to pick them up. There was a fairly large EPW camp that was outside of Hoffman, and we'd just go out, pick them up. I'd put them in the back of a deuce and a half. MPs would jump back there with them, and we'd just take them down to the EPW camp and drop them off. You got to think about these guys. These guys were conscripts more often than not. They'd been sitting out there on the front lines, no support, no communication, no food. You could tell they had it pretty bad. So whenever they'd come out of the hospital processing, you'd give them MREs, and they were just very, very thankful for what they had, and they were very happy. So when they were at an EPW camp, I imagine that was pretty much a big step up from what they were stepping out of. Right after the ground war, right before the ground war concluded, we were sitting in the talk, and I remember when the order went out for everybody to stop in place. Don't go any further. So we kind of figured at that point in time, it was cease and desist. The only engagements that occurred after that were those where they felt that a unit was being threatened. I can't speak to who might have engaged after the fact, but we knew at that point in time that it was pretty much over. Kuwait had been liberated. There was a mandate to stop at a certain point. The units were to go no further. And after that was said, we ended up going up and going into Kuwait, and we were doing battle damage reports for the Corps, unit assignments, those kind of things after the end of the ground war. Our new mission from that point became, we moved from Hoffman to KKMC, which is like King Khalid Military City. And I'm sure that a lot of people that were over there at that point in time know that location, because it became kind of an out-processing point for rotations back to the States and Germany. So, the Army's got to give you something to do always. So after we cleaned our equipment, we got our connexes squared away, and they were cleared through customs, they said, guess what? 7th Corps RTOC Reserve soldiers, you are now in charge of the gym and the swimming pool at a section of KKMC. So that in itself was a unique opportunity, but you started also running into the garrison type life too. So now you got a whole bunch of soldiers in one area that are kind of bored. But the food improved. It was done by contractors. We had a daily job that we did, and we kind of just stood by for notification on when we could rotate out. We were on a Space A list, and fortunately, since we had a small unit and we were cleared through customs, we could go at any time, and if there was an issue, then they could just fill us in and we could get on a plane and go back to Germany. And that's kind of what happened. End of April, I was sitting there at the swimming pool logging people in. One of my captains comes in, he says, hey, we're just notified, we're leaving tomorrow morning. Just shut the door, get everybody gone, let's go. Even though we were only gone for, 4.5 months maybe, it was nice to see the green of Stuttgart, Germany again when we flew in. I'm fortunate that I got to experience what I got to experience from that. But hey, it was a nice, I can't say it was nice, but it was a character builder, and it was nice to see be involved with that portion of the world.